What was unusual was what happened after. Keanu smiled politely, took the picture, thanked her, and then quietly sat back down alone near the gate, staring at the floor for several seconds like his mind had drifted somewhere far away from the room. No security rushed in. No assistant interrupted him. No celebrity performance. Just silence. And people noticed it because there was something strangely heavy about the moment. This was one of the most famous actors on earth. A man worth hundreds of millions, someone recognized in nearly every country in the world. Yet somehow, he still carried himself like someone trying not to take up too much space. That contrast followed Keanu Reeves everywhere. The subway photos. The quiet smiles. The stories from strangers who said he gave up seats, helped carry bags, waited patiently in lines without demanding special treatment. At first, people thought it was refreshing. And once people started learning what really happened in his life behind the cameras, everything about him began to feel different. Because this wasn't just a celebrity known for being nice. This was someone who had survived loss after loss after loss, without ever turning bitter. And honestly, that may be the most shocking part of all. Before the world saw him as a legend, Keanu Reeves spent most of his early life feeling unstable. His father disappeared when he was very young. The family moved constantly. Different cities. Different schools. Different people. Nothing stayed consistent for very long. And according to people who knew him back then, Keanu never fully looked comfortable in traditional environments. He struggled with dyslexia. School felt frustrating. Socially, he often seemed slightly detached, not cold, just somewhere else mentally. But acting changed that. For the first time, he found something that allowed him to disappear into emotion instead of avoiding it. And maybe that's why audiences connected to him later in life. Because even when he became famous, there was always something restrained about him. He never looked like someone fully consumed by celebrity culture. While other actors chased attention, Keanu often seemed uncomfortable with it. Even during interviews, there were pauses, moments where he would stop mid-thought, smile awkwardly, then continue speaking carefully, like he was editing himself in real time. At first people interpreted that as shyness. But years later, it started to feel more like emotional caution. And that difference mattered. Then Hollywood changed everything. Speed turned him into a massive movie star almost overnight. Suddenly Keanu Reeves wasn't just another actor anymore. He was everywhere. Magazine covers. Talk shows. Movie premieres. And when The Matrix exploded in 1999, his fame became something much larger than anyone expected. Neo wasn't just a role. It became part of global culture. People saw Keanu as calm, cool, untouchable. The man who dodged bullets on screen while carrying one of the biggest movie franchises in history. But what the public didn't fully see, was that some of the darkest moments of his life were already unfolding behind the scenes. And what happened next changed him permanently. Long before tragedy fully entered his life, Keanu had already experienced deep emotional connection through his friendship with River Phoenix. The two actors understood each other in a way few people around them seemed to. Both were sensitive. Both distrusted parts of Hollywood culture. Both carried a kind of emotional intensity beneath their public image. People around them described the friendship as genuine, which is rare in an industry built on performance. Then everything collapsed. In October 1993, River Phoenix died outside a nightclub in Los Angeles at just 23 years old. The shock hit Hollywood instantly. But for Keanu, it was quieter than that. He didn't publicly unravel. He didn't give emotional interviews. He didn't turn grief into spectacle. Instead, he withdrew into himself. And people close to him noticed a shift almost immediately. The lightness he sometimes carried became harder to find. There was still kindness. Still professionalism. But underneath it, something heavier had settled in. The kind of grief that changes how someone moves through the world. And maybe that's why later losses affected him so deeply. Because once someone learns how suddenly life can disappear, they never fully stop carrying that awareness. But the truth behind Keanu's private heartbreak was even more devastating than most fans realized. A few years later, Keanu met Jennifer Syme. Friends said she made him genuinely happy. Not performatively happy. Not celebrity couple happy. Real happy. The kind that softened him. When Jennifer became pregnant, Keanu reportedly threw himself emotionally into the idea of becoming a father. People around him said he was excited in a quiet, deeply personal way. They chose a name for their daughter. Everything seemed to be moving toward a new chapter. Then tragedy struck again. Their baby was stillborn late into the pregnancy. And according to reports, the emotional impact shattered both of them. Not loudly. Silently. That's what people often misunderstand about grief like this. Sometimes the destruction doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion. Distance. Two people sitting in the same room unable to fully reach each other anymore. And that's what reportedly began happening between Keanu and Jennifer. They loved each other, but the pain between them became difficult to survive. Eventually, the relationship fractured. Then came the moment that changed everything again. 18 months after losing their daughter, Jennifer Syme died in a car accident. Just like that. Keanu lost her too. And suddenly, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Best friend. Child. Partner. Loss after loss, within just a few years. No one expected someone to absorb that much grief without completely collapsing. But what made Keanu Reeves different was what happened afterward. Because he didn't become cruel. He didn't become self-destructive publicly. He didn't lash out at the world. If anything, he became softer. And that's where the story takes a turn people still struggle to understand. Over the years, stories about Keanu started spreading online almost accidentally. Not scandals. Moments. A crew member saying Keanu stayed late helping move equipment. A stuntman describing how Keanu gifted expensive motorcycles to the stunt team after The Matrix because he felt they deserved recognition. A stranger recalling how he calmly helped people after a flight disruption without drawing attention to himself. None of these stories sounded manufactured. That's why they spread so quickly. Because in Hollywood, audiences are used to image management. Publicists. Carefully controlled branding. But Keanu's kindness felt unplanned. There was no performance attached to it. And honestly, that's what confused people most. How does someone go through that much pain, and still remain gentle? Most people harden after loss. They become defensive. Closed off. But Keanu seemed to move in the opposite direction. Almost like suffering made him more aware of other people's pain instead of less. And once fans started recognizing that pattern, the public stopped seeing him as just another celebrity. He became something else entirely. A symbol of survival. But behind that image, there were still signs of loneliness that never fully disappeared. For years, Keanu lived very privately. No flashy Hollywood lifestyle. No constant public relationships. No desperate attempts to stay in headlines. Sometimes paparazzi photos showed him sitting alone on park benches eating quietly by himself. The internet turned those images into memes at first. But over time, people started reading them differently. Not as sad Keanu. As reflective Keanu. A man who had learned how fragile happiness really is. And once people understood his history, even his silence felt different. Then came another shift nobody expected. Alexandra Grant entered his life quietly. Not through scandal. Not through celebrity gossip. Through creativity. The two collaborated artistically first. Interviews between them felt calm, intellectual, strangely grounded compared to normal Hollywood energy. There was ease there. Mutual respect. And slowly, people began noticing something unusual about Keanu around her. He smiled differently. Not the polite red carpet smile audiences had seen for years. A relaxed smile. The kind that slips out naturally when someone finally feels emotionally safe. Then in 2019, the two appeared publicly together holding hands. And the internet exploded. Not because it was scandalous. Because it felt emotional. Fans who had followed Keanu's story for years suddenly realized something quietly powerful. After all the loss. After all the grief. After decades of emotional distance. He had allowed himself to love publicly again. And that moment hit people harder than anyone expected. Because by then, Keanu Reeves represented more than movies to many fans. He represented endurance. Proof that someone could go through unbearable pain, and still remain open to connection. But there was another layer to his life most people still didn't know. While all of this was happening, Keanu had reportedly been funding cancer research privately for years after watching loved ones battle illness. No giant publicity campaign. No press conferences. Just quiet support. That detail changed how many people saw him permanently. Because it revealed something important about the way Keanu Reeves moves through the world. He rarely talks about suffering directly. He responds to it through action instead. And maybe that's why his kindness feels believable to people. It comes from experience. Not branding. Today, at 61 years old, Keanu Reeves remains one of the most respected figures in entertainment. The John Wick films reminded audiences that he could still dominate action cinema physically and emotionally. Younger actors admire him. Directors trust him. Fans feel protective of him in a way that's unusual for someone with that level of fame. But the real reason people stay emotionally connected to Keanu has very little to do with movies anymore. It's the feeling people get when they look at him. The sense that underneath all the success, he never fully stopped being human. He still rides subways. Still pauses awkwardly in interviews. Still looks slightly uncomfortable with praise sometimes. And maybe that discomfort comes from understanding how temporary everything really is. Because once someone loses enough people, fame stops feeling permanent too. That awareness changes a person. You can see it in small moments with Keanu. The way he listens carefully before answering questions. The way he sometimes drifts into silence mid-conversation. The way joy around him often feels restrained, almost cautious. Not because he doesn't feel happiness. Because he understands how fragile happiness can be. And honestly, that may be why millions of people trust him emotionally. He doesn't pretend pain made him stronger. He simply carried it, without letting it poison him. That's much rarer. Especially in Hollywood. Especially after everything he survived. And maybe that's why those subway photos continue affecting people years later. Because deep down, they're not really about public transportation. They're about contrast. A man who became one of the biggest stars on earth, still sitting quietly among strangers like someone who never forgot what loneliness feels like. A man who lost almost everyone closest to him, yet still treats people gently. A man who could have become cynical long ago. But somehow didn't. And once you understand the full story behind Keanu Reeves, it becomes almost impossible to look at him the same way again. Not because he's perfect. Not because he's mysterious. But because somewhere between all the heartbreak, fame, grief, survival, and silence, he became something Hollywood almost never produces anymore. Someone who feels real. So what do you think about Keanu Reeves and everything he survived through the years? Do you believe pain is what made him so deeply respected around the world, or do you think there's still another side of him the public has never fully seen?